Hello, Planeswalkers. Welcome to the Lotus Archives, the heart of arcane knowledge and the realm of Magic the Gathering. Guided by the sages at KLVD Studios, embark on a journey through ancient scrolls and powerful spells. From deck-building enchantments to legendary battlefield stories, we bring you the wisdom and wonder of Commander. Whether you're a master mage or just tapping into your powers, the mysteries of the multiverse are yours to discover. Let the magic begin.
Hello, Planeswalkers. Welcome back to our next episode of the Lotus Archives. This week it's a little bit different as I ran into some computer issues when we tried recording this last weekend, and I ended up having to get some new parts for my computer. I lost some data, so I therefore lost our entire recording that we did last weekend. So, we're going to be talking about the same thing again this week that we talked about last weekend. So, it might seem like we're repeating ourselves, because we personally are, but it's going to be the first time you guys are hearing this. So,
that's alright, it happens.
Exactly.
Crazy tech stuff is obnoxious, but, we make what we do.
Exactly.
We do what we can.
So, with that being said, this week we have a very fun topic to talk about, and that is going to be mono green commanders. Now,
hell yeah.
As you guys have all heard me talk about, mono green is one of my favorite colors to build around. Almost all my decks have some sort of green in them. I like green almost as much as I like blue, but for different reasons. So, with that, Jack, why don't you go ahead and give us our first commander we're going to talk about?
Absolutely, yeah. So, as you know, green is all about the big stompies. It's all about the big, crazy, mana-producing dorks and jumping out big dinos, big beasties. Just huge, giant monstrosities from the woods that, make you scared when you go camping. So, first one that I got that I think embodies that pretty well is Omnath, Locus of Mana.
Oh, God.
Yeah, we're going old school with this one. So, Omnath, Locus of Mana, the original Omnath version. I know he's gone through a few changes over the past couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, we got a couple new ones.
Yeah, I know he got pretty banged up through Phyrexia and all that about a year or so ago. So this is his original version. He was just mono green. He was 3-drop, so 2 and a green for the legendary elemental. He has you don't lose unspent green mana as steps and phases end, and Omnath Locus of Mana gets +1/+1 for each unspent green mana that you have. So really cool way to stockpile your mana sources and stuff like that. He was one of the original ways a few years back where you didn't have too many ways to store mana. Usually you would just lose it. But when this guy came around, we were all like, oh shit, we can just stockpile all the mana we want and use it whenever. And then he just gets bigger and bigger.
Yep.
As that goes on. So, name of the game with this dude is basically just make as much green mana as you possibly can, using all the typical mana dorks that we love to see. Llanowar Elves, Elvish Mystic, Fintorn Elves, things like that. Crap loads of ramp, all your basic pieces, and just doing all the different mana doubling cards that you could possibly want. Things like Doubling Cube, Mana Reflection, crazy crap like that to just stockpile that green mana and make him as big as possible.
See, I hear stockpiling and all that, and I immediately think of, man, this card would have sucked like 15, 20 years ago, back when Mana Burn was still a thing.
Oh, yeah. Thankfully, I think he came out after they removed that. Like, they removed Mana Burn, and then we're like, well, if we don't have Mana Burn, what do we do with that unspent mana? Let's have a way to use it and make a giant green goo elemental to give us a way to use that, which is really cool.
Until someone pulls out a Yurlock.
Yeah, right. It's like, well, how about we just bring it on back now? But this was one of my first green decks that I built back in the day, and he was just It was a lot of fun to build. You basically just build up all that green mana. It's honestly one of my top picks for if you just want to build like a mono green good stuff deck and not
Hmm.
have a set theme exactly. You just want to be very Timmy. You just want to throw down big creatures of any variety and type and just do the mono green nature stuff. Omnath is the best way to go.
Yeah. So, what would be some cards that you'd like say you need to put in there?
Ones that you absolutely would definitely want to run would be things like Doubling Cube and Mana Reflection, which Doubling Cube is a nice little artifact for 2 mana. Pay 3, tap it. You basically just double the amount of mana you have in your pool, which is pretty sweet. So if you got 8 mana stashed up, use the Doubling Cube. Now you got 16. Mana Reflection, just whenever you tap a permanent for mana, makes twice that much mana instead. And you could also run something like Nyx Bloom Agent, which is that 4 and 3 green, and makes your mana tap for 3 times the amount. So, things like that, mana doublers, mana triplers, any of those effects to just get that green mana pumping.
All right. So,
Yeah, he's really sweet.
so what would you put him in the bracket scale?
I'd say you could probably do a solid 3 with this. I mean, the only real game changer currently we have that would go into this, like you would run Vorinclex for sure.
Yeah.
In here, I think, with given how cheap he is now,
Yeah.
like you really don't have any excuse to not run Vorinclex in this. So having that in there would be very cool. Since he's only $6, now he's definitely a must run.
I still can't believe that Vorinclex is under $10 now. That's insane to me.
It boggles my brain every time I see it. But so playing things like that would be very good. And you essentially, like I would say it's a 3.
Okay.
Solidly. There's not much else you could do to really put it too far ahead. Unless you want to run like the really fast mana pieces that all the, top tier decks play. But there's going to be more commanders. Like if you want to run something higher tier, you probably wouldn't pick Omnath. You'd pick like something else. Like one of the other ones that we're probably going to talk about later. To have as like a CEDH style. Is like he just wouldn't be fast enough per se to meet that meta requirement. So I think a solid 3 would be good. He could be a very fun, solid deck to play against, some upgraded precons and things like that. He could definitely pull out wins later on. Maybe like a turn 6, turn 7 win could be very possible with him. Make infinite mana.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
If you run, yeah, like the combos you'd run with him would be infinite mana combos. So
Yeah.
it'd be very strong with that.
I mean,
And
I
just play big beasties.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree on the tier 3 or bracket 3, mind me. But
Yep.
so
And for that, I put him in A tier.
yeah, I would definitely consider him an
Yeah.
A tier command or an A commander.
Yep.
Deck level bracket 3. So
Absolutely.
my first deck that I'm going to talk about, it goes along the lines of more land and mana as well. And my first commander is Bristly Bill Spined Sour.
Oh boy.
So, Bristly Bill reads 1 in a green for a 2/2 legendary plant druid. And he has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. And then it reads 3 and 2 green, double the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. So, this is pretty frickin'... It's a cool card. Like, I know I've mentioned before, like, I play quite a bit of Arena. I've built him as a deck in Arena, and I've had a lot of fun with it. But with Bristly Bill, you're going to want cards like Branching Evolution. You're going to want cards like Kami of the Whispered Hopes. And you're going to want cards like Evolution Sage. So you're going to want cards that are going to, 1, help you bust out those counters. And 2, help you with more landfall. Get you more land triggers. the more triggers that you're able to get and the more times each turn you're able to put lands onto the battlefield, the better with this guy. And he's going to be able to ramp up very, very quickly. I mean, if you have one laying around, a card like Doubling Season is absolutely amazing in this deck because that works with counters.
Yep. You'd probably want something like a Souza
Yes.
Lost but Seeking as well to get more lands into play.
Yep,
which would be very good.
Yeah, and Azusa, Lost but Seeking. There is a ton of cards. It's definitely a landfall focused deck. You're going to be running a lot of lands. I would probably personally go a minimum of 40 lands in this deck, as opposed to the stereotypical 28 to 32.
That's what 28, bro. That's pretty low.
Well,
I don't know if I'd run 28.
There's certain decks I do run 28, but I have a lot of mana rocks.
That's ballsy, dude.
Yeah.
That's the lowest I go is like 30.
Yeah.
And that's in my elf deck.
28.
Bro,
I haven't played that deck in a long time, and I took it apart. It was in one of my older Dimir decks that I had a lot of freaking mana rocks in it. It wasn't optimized at all, and it wasn't very good. But I would probably, with Bristly Bill, I'd probably stick around between 35 and 40 lands, because those lands are going to be the ones that are bumping up everything else. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, definitely more lands, but what would you say for a number?
I would say for typical landfall decks like Bristly Bill there, I'd say 38 to 40 would be good. I know when I played an old Windgrace deck, it ran at least 40 to 42, just because there was so many things that wanted lands in play, wanted, to put them in the graveyard, wanted to get them back from the graveyard. It played the Gitrog monster, so any type of landfall, stuff like that, if you're really focused on getting as many lands into play as possible, I'd say you want at least 40 for sure with that. Typically, I run like 33 to 35 otherwise.
Yeah, depending on the deck, I'm right around that same number. My dragon deck is a little bit higher on my lands. I think I run 35 or 36, something like that. I'd have to look up my exact number. Go. But
yeah, typically decks like that want to be big ramp and big stuff like that. You'll see these green decks, they run a few more lands. Like Omnath, you probably have 36, 37. I'd say 36 would probably be a good way to sit around. The cards I want to ramp the most and play a lot of ramp spells like Cultivate, Kodama's Reach, things like that, you'll have a lot more lands to achieve what you're trying to build up to.
Yeah,
so.
I just looked it up. I run 35 in my Miram deck.
There you go.
But even that, I could probably bump up a little bit. But regardless, Bristly Bill
looks like a lot of fun.
Yeah, he was a lot of fun to play on Arena. If I had more time to play frequently, he would be in contention for me to build as a deck. But unfortunately with Landfall, there's better options. Better options in multicolor cards. But I would probably put him tier 3. You could probably easily build a good tier 3 deck. You could easily build him tier 2 as well. But I think more often than not, you're going to see Bristly Bill in that high tier 2. He's going to be able to compete a lot with the precons. He doesn't do anything crazy on his own besides pump out stuff. I think you can
get some really big stuff going, big creatures, big counters, and if you want to like go, the faster route, I could see like a good high 3 tier. But yeah, I mean these could definitely be lower than that. You don't have to go the crazy big route. You could make it a little bit lower, maybe a 2 to fancy something like, you got a precon? Okay, I'm going to play this against your precon so you can test out the precon, see what you like about it, see what you don't like about it.
Exactly.
Which it's always good to have a deck that does that. I'd say at least have like 2 to 3 decks in your arsenal that run that, we can talk about that topic later.
Oh, yes, and that's definitely a topic I want to touch on. And I know you've gone through it with your fiance. I'm going through it with my fiance. I'm trying to get
Yeah.
her to play. If I could
Yep.
have someone at my house that I could sit down and play a game whenever I want, it'd be amazing. But it's a
Oh
matter
yeah.
of finding a deck that's easy enough for them to pilot to learn. And I know, like for you
Well,
with Claire, it was bears.
speaking of, that's my next deck. That's our next commander.
And
So
what a segue!
that was a solid segue. We planned the hell out of that one. So yes, speaking of teaching people how to play and teaching my fiance how to play, the next commander I have is a Eula, Queen Among Bears.
Oh boy!
Which, yeah, it's a great old time with the Bear Queen. So she's a 1 to green for a legendary bear that's a 2/2, as all bears typically are. And she has whenever another bear enters the battlefield under your control, you get to choose one of the following. You can either put 2/1/1 counters on a target bear, or target bear you control fights a creature you don't control. So, very fun, very fast style of bear tribal deck that we hadn't seen prior to Ayula's printing back in Modern Horizons,
Oh no!
which was absolutely fantastic. As soon as I saw her drop, I was like, okay, I need to build the bear deck immediately.
I remember you and I were talking, and this was before we started our podcast, and because you and I have for years now have just shot the shit, sent each other cards that we like from upcoming
Yep.
sets, and I saw that card, and I was like, wow, this seems like it's right up Jack's alley, and I immediately sent it over to you, and it seemed like
Yep.
almost instantaneously you sent me the image of it, and I'm like, oh,
Yep.
we were thinking the same thing.
Already on it. It's like it's already in the works, brother. So, it's a very fun deck. You have about 30 plus creatures, and you want them all to be bears. Basically, we're talking old school bears like grizzly bears, werebear, Balduvian bears, bear cub, and they're all just simple 2-drop 2/2s. That's all the bears are. So the speed of the deck comes in with just how cheap these bears are.
Mm-hmm.
And every time one comes in, it triggers Eula's ability to make them bigger. And when you make them bigger, you can then make them fight. So it's like Bear Fight Club, essentially, where it's just making the bear big, and then if your opponent has something else that you don't like, well, you just rustle up with your right to bear arms and you go to town on them. Which, yes, the bear puns are innumerable. My play group has been, they find me very unbearable whenever I play this deck. And I keep telling them, it's like, you gotta bear with me on it, It's gonna be okay. So with that, let's get into some Bear Necessities. Okay, I'm done. Because these are the simple necessities that you do need for this deck.
And I'm gonna stop you right there. Everybody, as much as I love the Jungle Book, we ain't singing.
No. I mean, I might. Don't tempt me. But so you just, basic things like those bears I mentioned, as many of the 2-drop 2/2s that you can play, and then just some fun, cheeky cards that you could also run. And if I see somebody not playing this deck in their bear deck, I'm going to wonder what the hell's wrong with you. You got to do the 4 Bears Blade. It's 4 bears! Play the 4 Bears Blade. I was talking to somebody the other day about this, and he's like, yeah, I see people not playing. It's like, why not? It's 4 bears.
Yeah.
Like, just run the blade. Run
Now-
the thing. Play into the meme. Play into the joke.
Now, for those that don't know, what is the Bears Blade?
It is simply a 3-drop equipment that has the equipped creature gets +3/+0 and trample and vigilance. And then if it dies, you attach the 4 Bears Blade to another creature you control. So if you have one bear that's equipped to it, and then it dies, well, the 4 Bears Blade just goes to another bear. And if that bear dies, so on and so forth. And the deck plays a lot of ways to make more bears, play more bears, get more tokens. Like, you can play something like Kamal Summons is a very good one. That's an older card. That's 3 and a green. Each player can reveal any number of creature cards from his or her hand, and then each player gets to make a 2/2 green bear token for each card they revealed. So you're spreading the love of bears. Anybody can do it. So if you've got a handful of other creatures in your hand that you haven't wanted to play yet, drop this guy down, reveal all those other bears, and then make more bears.
So I'm going to pause you for a second. With that Four Bears Blade, you're talking
Yeah.
about the one from Dominaria, correct?
Yeah.
The equipped creature gets +3/+0 vigilance and trample.
Yeah.
And whenever a creature dies, attach Four Bears Blade to target creature you control.
Yeah.
Okay. Because when I just pulled it up real quick, someone created a fake card called Four Bears Blade, FOUR,
Oh, and it's just 4 bears.
for a 3. Now, mind you, this is not a legal card by any means, but I'm going to put it on the screen now just because it's kind of freaking funny. But it's a 3-drop artifact equipment, and it reads, equipped creature loses all abilities and is a green bear creature with base power 2/2 toughness, or 2/2, named Grizzly Bears. When a crit creature dies, create 4 2/2 Grizzly Bear creature tokens named Grizzly Bears. And it's equipped
That's so
5.
great. That's so good.
I'm going
love
to
that.
say that because that's definitely going into the thing here.
That's so great because like grizzly bears is the most iconic, is one of the more iconic bears
Yes.
that you play in this. But you could also run. There is another guy that I've been looking at that I do run in the deck for, and that's Wilson Refined Grizzly.
Okay. Yep.
So he's one that I've thought about doing a separate build on, where he's 2 mana 2/2, but he's got a lot of cool abilities. He can't be countered. He has Vigilance, Reach, and Trample, and then he's got War 2, and you can choose a background. So one thing I just keep thinking of is building him with a background of like Raised by Giants. So he's just a massive 10/10 bear that can't be countered and has War 2, and then just Voltron the hell out of him and just slap a bunch of equipment into like this mono green, bear dude. It
See-
wouldn't be the bear tribal deck that a Eula is, but it could be something else that's fun.
See, speaking of bear decks that we want to build, I know we talked about this when it first came out, but like one of the decks that I'm thinking about building for my fiance is Duskana, the Rage Mother.
Okay.
2 red, green, white for a 5/5 legendary bear. And she reads, when Duskana the Rage Mother enters the battlefield, draw a card for each creature you control with base power and toughness 2/2. Whenever a
Yeah, I
creature,
looked at that one.
yeah, whenever a creature you control with base power and toughness 2/2 attacks, it gets +3/+3 until end of turn.
That's very good. It's like, tell me you want bears without telling me you want bears.
Yeah. Like, that's a very
That's
simple
really funny.
aggro BS deck. But another one is like Doc Orlock, but these are all not mono green.
Yep.
But there is so many freaking mono green bears that you could put
So
into
many.
a deck. It's not even funny.
Yep.
I mean,
You got Forest Bear and all the different cool, fun bears that exist out there, and they're all relatively cheap too. Like they're all the only bear that I think is more expensive, and the only reason that it's expensive is it hasn't been reprinted in forever, and that's Razor Claw Bear. It's
okay.
about $40. It's just a pretty basic 4-drop 3/3, so it's a little, it's like 2 extra mana for extra power. If it attacks and is blocked, it gets +2/+2 until the end of turn, so it's nothing really fancy, but it's a weird bear that's never been reprinted. So that's why it's expensive. But most of these other bears have seen reprints, or they're just not worth,
Or they're
a crazy
commons.
amount of money. So yeah, a lot of them are commons. Yeah.
But bears are
So
a
it's
lot
very
of
good.
fun.
And it's a lot stronger than most people would think. Like I play tested a few decks against this and found that they just wouldn't compete in a one-on-one setting. Bears can just annihilate you without even a second thought.
Well, and that's
Like-
all because of the speed that they can put
Yeah.
out. It's no
They're
different than elves.
Very fast. Yeah, and you can run a few elves into this to get some mana dorks running and get the ball rolling even faster. Just a simple Llanowar elf, Elvish Mystic if you want. Like, you could play 2 of those, right? Like, 1 Elvish Mystic, 1 Llanowar Elf, and then 30 bears, and
Jesus.
you're good. Like, you're off to the races, pal. You're fine. You're done. And the deck just goes from there. Like, Ayula's ability to fight things after making things bigger is a great form of green creature removal,
Yeah.
which I really like.
Yeah. So what would you
So it's
where would you put Ayula?
so as far as our tiers go, I'd still put her in the A tier.
Mm-hmm.
Very strong, very potent commander, though still lacking in a certain sense where it's like if you don't play bear, she doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
So like if you're lacking a bear for whatever reason, she's just kind of gonna sit there and not do much. But it's got a very strong, you know, line of sight there to just have the laser focus on the bears and get that ball rolling. So A tier for sure. And after I've played it and play tested it some more with the bracket system, I'd say she's a solid 3.
Yeah.
Like,
She's
don't
definitely
underestimate the bear.
Yeah. I mean, and like we've talked about 100 times, it seems like at this point. You can't go by the bracket system word for word. You got to go intent. Because your Ayula deck, I've seen it played back when you were just play testing the thing,
Yeah,
and the thing is strong, and I'm sure it's gotten even
very
better.
potent. I mean, it's stayed the same. We haven't had much new bear tech recently, so like, it just is what it is, and what it is a very fast, cheap, you know, bear tribal deck. A lot of the stuff is, you got a lot of 2 to 3 drops. So if you just keep a 2 land hand by, you can get that ball rolling and be off to the races in no time. And most other decks just can't compete unless they're also built to be that fast and at that higher tier. So
Yeah. So,
very potent, very good. You can also do very budget friendly. So
without a doubt. All right. So
absolutely. So
my
what you got, brother?
next build here, it's a little bit different. When I first saw this card spoiled, I laughed because first of all, I thought it was some fake fan made card because it looks like it's straight out of Studio Ghibli. And that is a little fun guy by the name of Shrufus Sproutsire. So Shrufus is 2 and a green for a 1/1 legendary creature Saproling. And he reads Trample. Whenever a Saproling you control deals combat damage to a player, create that many 1/1 green Saproling tokens. Yeah, I definitely thought this was a fake card when it first came out. This could potentially be very disgusting if built the right way.
It sounds very fun.
Yeah, like part of me really wants to build this thing up just to be able to play it once and then say, okay, I'm good. Because that's a lot of freaking tokens.
Yeah.
Especially if built correctly. Throw in a card like Doubling Season and all the other token doublers, and this deck goes bonkers. But you're going to want cards like Thelonite Hermit, which bumps up your Saprolings. So now instead of 1/1s, they're 2/2s. Then you're going to want cards like Tender Shoot Dryad. At the beginning of each upkeep, create a 1/1 green Saproling creature token. And as long as you have the City's Blessing, Saprolings you control have +2/+2. Then last but not least, Spore Crown Thallid. Each other creature you control that's a fungus or Saproling gets +1/+1. So
Pretty good.
you bump all these Saprolings up, you're just going to keep getting more and more Saprolings. The higher damage, the more you're going to get. I could easily see this deck getting out of hand really, really quick. Because a lot of these...
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. not only is Shrufus giving you saplings every time you deal combat damage, but saplings are fairly cheap in terms of
Yep.
CMC. Like some of the ones that I talked about, like Tender Shoot Dryad, it's a 5-drop. So it's going to be a little bit later in the game you're going to be dropping that. But cards like Spore Crown Thallid, that's only a 2-drop. And that's already bumping up your creatures. So I would build this deck pretty much to be getting your saplings out, getting as many as possible. So cards like Doubling Season and other doublers are going to be great in this deck. You're going to want a lot of fast ramp to be able to get as many of these things out as you possibly can. One of the big things with this is it's a straight up overrun deck. So a cool thing about this, there is a little combo that you can do with this, and it's going to be using the card Spore Mound and Life and Limb. Oh yes. So
Okay.
Spore Mound is 3 and 2 green for a 3/3 fungus, and it reads landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 green sapling creature token. And Life and Limb is an enchantment that's 3 and a green. All forests and all saplings are 1/1 green sapling creatures and forest lands in addition to their other types. So, essentially...
Ah.
Oh, yeah.
Huh.
So, essentially, all you're going to do is play a forest, Spore Mound triggers, creating a 1/1 sapling forest land creature token. And then it just triggers an infinite amount of times. So
Interesting.
it, without a way to stop it, it results in a draw.
Yep.
Because you're going to have infinite creature tokens, infinite enter the battlefield effects, infinite landfall. It's a little cheeky combo. Good way to close out a game via a draw. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend to put it into your deck, but it's a fun little trick to do.
You could probably run something like,
You would have to have a way to stop it.
yeah, like a sack outlet or something.
Like
would
an
work. If you
Ashnod's
play
Altar.
like Altar of, yeah, Altar of Dementia, something like that, because then you can. I'd probably just run Altar of Dementia, because then you can sacrifice the Spore Mound that's making the tokens, and then sack all the tokens to mill everybody out.
Yeah.
That's probably what I would do.
So I'm looking at it right here. That's another one of the combos. And you, once you get the infinite mana and all that stuff, you activate Alter Dementia any number of times by sacrificing Spore Mound and any number of creatures, milling any player any number of cards. So you can
That's
essentially
pretty
win
fun.
the game just by milling, which is pretty freaking cool.
I'm here for it. I like the sound of that.
But it's a way to end it. In terms of power, I'd probably this one we went back and forth on the last time. I'd probably put Shrufus high tier 2.
Yeah.
I don't think he's as good as like Ayula, or even Bristly Bill.
Right.
But I think he could definitely compete with some of these precons that are coming out. In terms of power or commander power, I'd probably put him in the B. High C, low B. But
Yeah, I could see that. I could see
Yeah.
like a solid B tier, where he's like a fun, janky kind of shroomy sap rolling fungus deck
yeah, exactly.
that wants to just make a bunch of tokens, go ham with little sap rolling dudes running around. It seems like it could be a lot of fun, and I think it could be on par with most precons that you could just play test against.
Yeah, without a doubt. So, on to our
Very
next
good.
one. What do you got for me?
We've got a very cool, cheeky one that I've been looking at for a while now, actually. It is Gargos, Vicious Watcher.
Oh boy.
Yeah, for 3 and 3 green, you get a legendary Hydra with Vigilance, and it makes Hydra spells you cast cost 4 less to cast. And whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell, Gargos will fight up to one creature you don't control. And he's a big old 8/7.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so this is a Hydra tribal style deck, which is pretty sweet. Would say Gargos really fancies the Hydra style with that cost reduction on it, given how pretty much just about every Hydra comes with a X in its casting cost, as typically most Hydras, like, let's see, what's a good example? Like Mistcutter Hydra
Yep.
is one of my personal favorites. It's X and a green, can't be countered, has haste, has protection from blue, and it enters with X 1/1 counters on it. About 80 or so, 85% of all Hydras are built in that similar way where they have an X in their cost, and that will correlate with how big they are when they enter the battlefield. So, with Gargos giving that 4 reduction, that counts towards their X cost. Right? So, if I were to just have Mistcutter Hydra in hand and Gargos on the field, you could pay 1 green to play a 4 power toughness Mistcutter Hydra, which is pretty damn sweet. And you can add whatever extra mana you want into that. So if you have some extra sources lying around, whatever you put into it, add 4 on top of that with Gargos in play, which is just fantastic. So you get a lot of +1/+1 counter focus, a lot of really cool, big, scary Hydra monsters, which I've always loved Greek mythology. I find the Hydra to be probably one of the coolest creatures we've ever seen from old, legends and stories regarding stuff like that. So
Yeah,
I just think it's a really cool, fun style.
yeah, I definitely wouldn't disagree. The Hydras are a very cool creature in Magic and in mythology alone.
Hmm.
You There's a ton of cards that work well in Hydra based decks. I'm sure.
There's a lot of Hydras.
Yes. I mean, just looking at the Hydras alone.
So essentially, with him, you're gonna want to have a decent number of ways to like proliferate counters.
Yep.
Playing something like Evolution Sage is really good here. Getting those land drops, proliferating all your Hydras, getting all their 1/1 counters up, and playing other things, like Hardened Scales, doubling season if you can, a bunch of stuff like that. The newer Vorinclex that doubles counters,
Oh God, yeah.
you know, stuff like that. If you want to drop the money onto it, which you don't exactly have to.
I mean, you can even throw an Omnath
Yeah.
Locus of Mana in there.
You could absolutely toss in Omnath into this one if you wanted to have to add up some extra mana. If you maybe you know if you've played your stuff for the turn, but you have maybe 1 to 2 lands left, you can tap those, stockpile it, right? Keep it saved in reserve for later. Add it to your next turn to make a big Hydra. It's pretty damn cool. It's a very fun, unique style to play where it's like, I mean, Green really likes to focus on the big creatures, and I've always liked how it's okay. What flavor of big creature do you want? Do you want dinosaur? Do you want beast? Do you want Hydra? Like, what do you want? Bears? Which, what crazy flavor of big bad scary monster do you want to play in this realm, right? Which is really cool that you can, you know, you can have two green decks at the table, but one could be like, oh, I'm gonna have all these sap rollings with this little Shroofus running around. It's like, okay, well, I'm gonna have a giant Hydra ready to chomp on it, so let's see what happens, you know?
Yeah, and
And
hydras I
that's
feel are one of the tribes that aren't
they're
as
underrepresented.
yeah, and I wouldn't even say underrepresented because there's a shit ton of cards for them.
There's a bunch of
It's
Hydras, but people just don't. I've yet to see a Hydra deck out in the wild.
no, they fly under the radar
Yeah,
because people think, oh, mono green, I'm gonna go elves, gonna go
right.
sapperlings. Um, oh, I want big stompy creatures,
So you
dragons.
play like yeah, dragons. Like you just play things like Omnath or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Where
the issue with hydras as opposed to like dragons and even dinosaurs
yeah,
is most hydras don't have anything other than the X cost, which bumps them up. So they don't have flying. They don't have. I mean, some of them have trample, but
yep. Decent number of them have trample. Some of them can get reach, I believe, but I think a lot of their potential and their power comes in their versatility and
yeah,
almost in some ways their like refusal to die in some cases, which there are some hydras that embody the like the aspect of the hydra where it's like cut one head off, two more grow back, and they're just almost impossible to kill. The protean hydra is one such example where it's X and green, so it has that where it comes in with X counters on it, and if damage would be dealt to it, you prevent that damage and just take off that many counters from it. And then you whenever a counter is removed from it, you put two more back on there at the end step.
yeah,
So if they didn't, so it's and Protean Hydra is basically just like a really sweet name to like reference back to the old Greeks,
yup,
style of Hydra. And this one was way back in M11. So this is one of like the first Hydras that we got way back in the day. Not one of the very first Hydras, but one of like it's one of the only Hydras I've seen so far that truly embodies that nature of oh, one was removed, let's put two more back on.
yeah. I mean,
But it
like,
has to survive,
yeah, like I
right?
mean, Progenius has protection from everything,
Right.
but in terms
He's all
of
the colors.
yeah, in terms of getting head removed, put more back on, Protein
Yep.
Hydra I think is the only one that does that.
I'm sure there are a few others here that, if they're dealt damage, you remove counters instead. Yeah, like Iron Scale Hydra is one that if a creature would deal damage to it, you prevent that damage, but instead you add counters
Yup.
to it, and it's a 5/5. So Iron Scale is just like a base 5 drop 5/5. But like if he survives the damage dealt to it, or actually it's not even that, you just prevent damage and you just make him bigger. So if he just blocks like a 10/10, it's like, okay, well, you're not going to deal 10 damage to me. I'm going to get 10 counters and be a 15/15.
Yeah. I mean,
So it's that cool resiliency to, the Hydras, which makes them really, really cool.
another one is the Phytohydra.
Yep.
Damage to be dealt to Phytohydra, put that many +1/+1 counters on it instead. But for a frickin' 5 drop, it only comes in as 1/1 for green and white. So
Yep.
it's
But
a
that
little
can get
tricky.
really big really quick.
Yes. But what would
So
you
it's a very cool
yeah.
tribe.
What would you put your guy here at?
As far as our like just base tier list going here, I'd say he's. So I had one thing in mind, but then I'm not sure if I would swap it over. I'd say he's like solid B, as far as good mono green things go. I believe in our other one when we were first talking about this, we mentioned Zexara
Yep.
as the other kind of better potential for a multicolored Hydra deck where he's got Death Touch, it's Sultai.
Yeah.
So whenever you cast a spell with X and its mana cost, like every Hydra usually does, you make a Hydra with that many counters on it. So like you play one Hydra, you get another Hydra on top of it. So in Zaxara, you would play Gargos and you'd play all the other Hydras on top of that. So like it's if you wanted to go the mono green route for Hydras, then Gargos is very good for just the streamlined. I don't want to mess with any other colors. I just want the green to keep it as simple as possible. I don't want to have to faff around with, dual color stuff and make my mana base all crazy and adding, all this extra crap to it. So I would say that that's very good for just like a simple, streamlined way of play. Like Gargos fits the bill really well, I think, with that. Like I personally would probably play Gargos over Zexara to have that simple mana base and simple way of going. Like if you're starting to get into the game and you really like Hydras and you don't want to faff around with like dual lands and extra crazy spells like that, Gargos is the best bet.
Yeah,
so I give him a B for being the best bet for that one.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Like, I mean, I personally like
Yeah.
Zaxara, and I'll probably end up building a Zaxara deck, or there's other options for multicolor Hydras.
Yep.
But if you want to just go straight Hydra, not have to worry about any bullshit, Gargos is great for that.
You got enough support and enough, things to make it happen in mono green. So you got nothing to worry about with that.
Exactly. So,
Absolutely.
my next card is a fairly newer card, and it is a... Well, when I first saw it, it looked like a Newfoundland dog. Um, but then it started creeping me out the more and more I looked at it. And that would
Yeah,
be
it's a little weird.
Kona Rescue Beastie. Kona is 3 and a green for a 4/3 Beast Survivor, which we don't see Survivor that much anymore, if at all.
Well, it came out with Duskborn.
Was it brand new in
Was
Duskborn?
the set where they introduced Survivor?
Okay.
Yeah, it's the brand new creature type that came out with Duskborn.
Okay. I wasn't sure we saw it prior. But
No, not that I can recall anyway.
yeah. So Kona has a unique ability called Survival. At the beginning of your second main phase, if Kona is tapped, you may put a permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield.
Bro, that's broken.
Yeah, I don't know how this one passed the testing, but that is very easy to break. Especially with how many vehicles we have and how many cards we have that are going to tap a creature. And
Yeah.
I mean, you got cards like Jespera Sentinel, you got cards like Loam Dryad, cards like Ceruli Caretaker. All these cards are going to tap Kona. And
Yep.
how I would personally build this deck up is get a bunch of cards in there that are going to make you tap Kona without attacking. So whether that's vehicles, whether it's tap mechanics with different cards, turning them into a mana dork, whatever you need to do, and then have a bunch of huge fucking creatures in that deck that and high CMC other cards, enchantments, whatever.
Eldrazi.
Yeah, Eldrazi is the big one.
Eldrazi.
And sheet
That's the
them
way I
out.
would go.
'Cause-
I'd go the route of Eldrazi for sure.
Yeah, because I mean, with Kona being a 4-drop, so hypothetically, by turn 4, you could potentially be cheating out some huge fucking 10-10, 12-12 Eldrazi. Which,
Sounds like a pretty good time to me, bud.
yeah, I would hate to play against this deck.
It definitely seems like it's pretty crazy. I know one of my buddies was really inquiring that we would talk about this one. And it definitely has potential to be very powerful. Because he and I were talking about like how, yes, you have to wait till your second main phase, but given all the different ways we listed to be able to tap Kona prior to that, like,
Oh, yeah,
sure,
there's...
Yeah,
There's
you tap
so
in
many
main
ways.
phase, you go right to your second main, and as long as Kona survives throughout, whatever shenanigans, which, I mean, God's help your buddies if it survives that long, then you just dump out whatever you want, which
Yeah.
is insane. Now, granted, with some of the Eldrazi's, it would be tricky with them because they do have cast
Hmm.
requirements on them. So if you were to say play like the original Kozilek, that when you cast it you draw cards, if you cheated into play with Kona, you don't get that ability.
Yes.
So you'd want to be careful of like making sure okay, well you're putting the permanent into play, you're not casting it. So if it's a really big cool thing that has a cast trigger on it, make sure you're aware of that and because if you're not, somebody will correct you and you'll be like, well, shit, I didn't know that, and then you'll feel
Yeah.
kind of goofy and try to avoid. I've made that mistake a few times. So
Yeah. I mean, you essentially you're just gonna want to cheat out big fucking creatures, whether it's
yeah,
either the two Galta cards.
yeah,
There's a
big
ton of
scary.
ways you can do it. Apex Altasaur,
Yep.
Testodon, World Spine Worm. I mean, there is a ton of big freaking creatures you can sheet out, and that's how I would build Kona up. In terms of bracket leveling, Kona was a tricky one for me to think about.
Hmm.
I think Kona borderlines right between 2 and 3. Potential to be very good and potential to be better than a precon, but if you make it just with the bare minimum, I think it's more along the lines of precons. What are your thoughts?
I can see this as being just absolutely broken
Oh yeah,
in a number of different ways. I could see people just abusing the hell out of its abilities, cheating it into play really quickly. Uh, it definitely has CEDH potential,
I mean, I
I
think
think.
yeah, like I think it all comes down to who's building the deck. Um,
Yeah.
if you put it
What
into
their
the
mindset
yeah,
is and all that.
if you put it into the hands of someone like you or I or probably anybody in your play group, this thing is gonna be high tier
Oh, it's broken.
3, tier 4 level deck. But
Yeah.
if you put it into someone that's just starting to play and they're building around it, I'd probably put it high 2, low 3, depending on how much they know about Magic.
Yeah.
Realistically, it's probably hovering between 3 and 4.
Absolutely. Like I would say a solid 3 for this 100% because all the crazy big things that you can just dump into play. I mean, being able to on the same turn that this comes out, right? So realistically, we're thinking typical green deck that can ramp fairly decently. You can get this guy out as early as probably turn 2, turn 3,
Yeah,
you
easily.
know. So, I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't know what's scarier than a turn 2 Voron collects Voice of Hunger.
Not much.
Like, if somebody can drop that thing on turn 2 or even turn 3, the game's kind of over at that point
Yeah.
because like it's so early in the game that there's just not much your opponents can do about that. Their lands are probably already tapped. They've got minimal resources already, and then you've got this land denial happening for what's essentially dirt cheap now,
Yep.
and it's gonna be almost impossible, for them to do things. And you know, looking at this, it's like they've got more game changers and stuff listed for a deck like this than any other because it just has that potential. I mean, you can Blightsteel Colossus on turn 3.
Yeah.
Like realistically, 100%, you can Blightsteel Colossus turn 3 with this. I don't know what other aside from like some crazy other multicolored decks that could probably pull it off. And mono green, that's unheard of.
Yeah.
So being able to pull something like that off, I put this guy in S tier for sure.
Yeah, in terms of commander
And
level, he's 100% an S.
yeah, like this is absolutely an S tier deck with solid 3 to 5 range. I think you'd have to really try.
Not to make it good.
Yeah, you'd have to try to intentionally be goofy with it, and to like make it lower than a 3.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, I think the only way you'll see this as a lower than a 3 will be if the person building the deck doesn't do any research at all in MTG's history, and
Yeah.
they end up just saying screw it and brand new to the game.
Right. Like you have to like really try to not abuse an ability that lets you just put free shit into play.
Yeah.
Like that alone is enough to just say, "Hey, I'm a broken commander."
Yeah, pretty much.
Any ability to just put stuff into play for free, or for any other type of cost, like, "Hey, I'm looking at you, Kirk. I'm looking at you, Mister. I can pay life instead of mana." Yeah,
Yeah.
that's broken. A lot of people will say, "Well, I don't care what you're putting into play with it. That ability is broken." You know.
It's no
So
different than
it's
many other commanders that are just freaking so broken that
yeah.
you don't know how. Well, what was the one big commander that got banned a few years ago? I want to say it was like Leovold or something like that.
Leopold?
Maybe not Leovold. Oh, it's gonna bother me.
He's been banned for a long time. He's
Yeah.
different.
No, I was thinking of Leovold, but man, he's one of the ones that it's broken as hell,
Yep.
which is why it's banned.
Yep.
But with that, what is your next
Yeah, he's
card?
very good. So the next one I've got here for us is a very interesting one. So I've been tied between a couple to build myself here, and I really like the look of this one. It's Eve Progenitor Ooze.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I really like the look of this one. It's 2 and 3 green for a legendary 2/2 ooze, and it has probably one of my favorite mechanics of all time since I've been playing Magic was Storm. So a mono green commander with Storm is very cool, very unique, and it also has on top of that, it isn't legendary if it's a token, right? So like first thought is like, okay, well, a legendary creature with Storm. Storm is when you cast a spell, you copy it for each spell before it this turn, and then the copies become tokens, but it's legendary, so it's got to have that little caveat of like, okay, well, if it's a token, it's not legendary. And then it enters the battlefield with a 1/1 counter on it for each other ooze you control. So this thing is very cool, very unique, and very focused on the ooze tribal style of things, which just like adds into that, crazy fun pick your flavor of green, right? Like now we're adding oozes to the mix. So you got elves, hydras, mushrooms, and now it's like now you can play slimes. You can play these cool green little like oozy slime creatures to like run around and do weird shit with. So it's just the most appealing thing that I've ever seen with green that lets you just play all these different creature types that you just don't see anywhere else. So with Ave, you're gonna want things like Bio Waste Blob
Yep.
that just gives other ooze you control +1/+1. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control a commander, you create a token that's a copy of Bio Waste Blob. So the coolest thing I think about these ooze creatures is their self-replicating kind of like idea, right? Like they have this innate ability to self-replicate and make more of themselves on their own and make themselves bigger based on that. Like things like biogenic ooze, right? One of the old Ravnica thing from the Simic Guild where it's like, okay, biogenic ooze enters, you make a 2/2 green ooze token. And then at the beginning of your end step, you put a 1/1 counter on each ooze you control. And then it's got, for 1 and 3 green, you make a green ooze token. When this came out and I was playing on Arena, I built like an absolute bonkers deck with biogenic ooze. This thing like stole games back, a couple of years ago. It was absolutely insane. I loved everything about it.
So, what would you rank them?
I would say can be a good, fun, uh, almost like it's a tough one because like you've got plenty of ooze support and things like there's plenty of ooze creatures to make a deck like this function, and you're gonna see a lot of similarities between this deck and something like the Hydras, where they focus on 1/1 counters and have just the same kind of mana dork ramp and things like that with a few different pieces here and there. I'd say the deck can be a solid B, kind of right alongside Gargos as like the cool, fun, different tribal deck.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Yeah,
It could definitely be a fun build for a tribal build. In terms of power, I have to agree with you on that.
yeah.
It's I don't think it's going to be up there CEDH level build. It's not going to be up there.
Probably not.
I mean, I could be wrong, and you could build this thing, and you could end up wiping the board with what I believe is my higher tier decks. You don't know until you see it. I personally just haven't seen enough ooze decks that have actually come to fruition. And I'm sure you haven't either, which is why you want to build them.
Right? Like, I just keep seeing these, and it just seems so fun. I mean, this one has one really cool, unique thing going for it that I'd probably build the most out of with, and that's Slime Against Humanity. It's got its own any number of cards that the deck can have mechanic into it, which is like it's a 3-drop sorcery. You make a 0/0 green ooze with trample, and it gets X/1/1 counters on it, where X is 2 plus the total number of cards you own in exile and in your graveyard that are oozes or are named Slime Against Humanity. And the deck can have any number of cards named Slime Against Humanity.
Yeah.
So it's a really fun style, I think, where it's like you just have 20 of these cards, about 30 oozes, and then you're just done, right?
Yeah.
And then like that's just it. It's like, okay, I'm just gonna play all these and just go to town with making as many crazy ooze things as I can, and then play a decent sized turn where it's like maybe you're able to play 2 to 3 Slime Against Humanities and then play your commander, and you're having a grand old time with some oozy goodness.
Yeah. That's it could be a lot of fun, that's for sure.
I definitely think so. So you could definitely put it in the 3 bracket. I could see it hanging out there where it could be on par, if not maybe a little bit better
Yeah.
than some precons. It has the upgraded niches to it where, it's got more streamlined stuff in it, more synergistic than what we see in some typical precons nowadays.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that here. So
100%.
my next card that I am going to talk about is probably one of my favorite mono green commanders. I personally have this deck built. I have a lot of fun playing it. People don't have a lot of fun playing against me. And that would be from one of my personal favorite sets, just in terms of where they got the inspiration from. And that card would be Finn the Fangbearer. And he
Love
is
this guy.
1 in a green for a 1/3 human warrior. And he reads Death Touch. Whenever a creature you control with Death Touch deals combat damage to a player, that player gets 2 poison counters.
Woohoo!
That is fun as hell for me.
I love everything about it.
And
We'd love to see it.
just remember, Infect is still the same in Commander.
Yep.
Infect,
10.
poison counters,
That's
all the same thing. So with this, in my personal deck that I had built, it is a lot of small CMC creatures with Death Touch. So I have cards like Ambush Viper in there, Sedge Scorpion. I have cards like Ankle Biter. A lot of small CMC cards because I want to get those out there fast.
Yep.
And the faster I'm able to get those out, the faster I am to win. So with Finn, as long as you have that Death Touch, you're golden. So you're going to want some cards, like I was saying, the small CMCs with Death Touch. In terms of combos, there's the generic combos for any green decks that you could throw in there. I personally don't worry about combos in this deck just because it's fast enough without them. In terms of other cards, obviously I'm going to have cards like Rampant Growth and Cultivate in there, as well as Kodama's Reach. The big stuff that I have in there that I'd want is going to be like Rona's Monument to make green creatures cost less. Obviously, Swiftfoot Boots. You're going to Emerald Medallion. All those cards. Realistically, Finn is a very, very simple commander to build. As long as you have ways of getting by defenders. So, cards like Rogue's Passage, Access Tunnel are great in this deck. But other than that, Finn, very good. Don't have much to say other than you will be hated off the table as soon as you pull this guy out.
Highly likely, yeah. Infect has a bit of a poor reputation about it, though I would argue, I mean, as someone who loves Infect, and will always love Infect, and love the Phyrexians till the day I die, we get a bad rap. You know, Infect it's tough. People are still kind of upset about the whole, oh, you only need 10 poison to lose. A lot of people say it should be higher. I don't think so. I think it's still... Because in a 4-pod game, that's still 30 poison counters you have to put out.
Exactly.
To end the game. So making it higher just makes it more unlikely. Like, it's not viable anymore if it reaches a higher point than that. If you say make it 20, which a lot of people have said, okay, now that's 60. That just doubled the amount of poison counters I have to distribute. And there's not enough. There's not enough ways to like reasonably get that out there to make it a viable strategy anymore.
I mean,
so
yes,
you got to kind of appeal to both.
Yeah, yes and no. I wouldn't be opposed to seeing the rules committee bump up what it is for Infect. I think
I'd be upset.
It would depend on how high they went. If they went to 20, that's when I'd be like, okay, yeah, that's too much.
That's ridiculous.
Because Infect
20 can't happen.
Infect is different than commander damage.
Right.
Like, there's not as many ways to give Infect. Like, a lot of creatures have it. Poison counters are big. I mean, you got, especially with cards with Proliferate, there's ways to bump up all counters. But at the same time...
you can get it done. I mean, with the Phyrexian set we had, the all-be-one set and all that, we got a lot of cool Phyrexian stuff, a lot of cool support for, Toxic and things like that, which can put out more poison counters than... I mean, it's not as good as Infect, because Infect was like, oh, my power inflicts the poison, so if I hit you with something like Blyster Colossus, okay, you're just dead, right? Which I think that's what probably a lot of people are like, oh, I wish I could survive more than one hit from a Blyster Colossus,
Yeah.
Or maybe more than one hit from a Skithiryx and some other random Infect creature. So I believe when they made Toxic, they kind of tried to, appease that, where it's like, okay, well, now it's based on the Toxic number, not the creature's power, so pumping the creature up doesn't change that. And like with Finn, if you just make the creature bigger, that doesn't change their poison, because it's just Death Touch is giving 2 poison no matter what. So that's a reasonable way of doing it.
And that's why I think Finn is definitely on the higher scale. He's played a lot.
Yep. Well, he's the highest ranked dude, isn't he? Like on EDH he's the highest.
Yeah, I believe he's still the highest ranked mono green commander. He has, yeah, he has over 3,000 more decks built than
Yep.
Omnath Locus of Mana.
Which is absurd for an uncommon. Like this,
Yeah.
this is an uncommon we're talking about. Like
I mean,
the fact that it's
realistically, this
it's
should
really
have never
good.
been an uncommon.
Nah, he should have been a rare. At least I would argue for him to be a rare. All
Yeah.
day, every day.
But Finn, without a doubt, is an S tier commander.
Yep.
If we can go higher than an S, I would. Um, in terms of deck bracket, that's where Finn gets a little tricky because he could easily compete in most bracket 4 decks
Yeah.
pods. But if you look at what you put into him, you could argue that it's a bracket 2 deck. Realistically, if you don't put any game changers, and like I personally don't run any combos in my Finn deck.
Right.
But out of curiosity, I haven't looked yet. I want to see what Architect has my Finn deck at. Boom. Boom. Okay. So Architect right now has my deck as a bracket 3. But that's only because I have a Vorinclex in that deck. Voice of Hunger. So I have one game changer.
Ah,
I have one game
that makes
changer
sense.
and 3 non-land tutors in there. So I have Worldly Tutor, Defense of the Heart, and Pattern of Rebirth. But
Okay.
besides those, you're gonna be hard pressed to make him not be a high tier deck because
Yeah, 100%.
I don't care if you literally just throw in a bunch of creatures in there and some of them have Duff Touch. Anybody you play against is going to see Finn across the table and they're going to try and get rid of you the quickest. Which sucks as a Finn player, but
Yeah.
it's understandable why they're getting rid of me. It's no different than someone seeing an Eldrazi across the table. That Eldrazi is not going to last because people don't want to not be able to play the game. But
Exactly. Like it all comes down to, because this is like the fun factor, and infect can lead to kind of a not so fun idea, which I think Finn could be. I think people could be more reasonable with Finn because, yeah, they're Death Touch, but each hit only gives you 2. Although
exactly.
with that, if 5 Death Touch creatures hit you, you're dead. But as opposed to like an infect card, like Skithrix or the Blightsteel, where it's almost like a one-hit KO,
Yeah.
essentially, I think Finn could get a little leeway with that, where like my Phyrexian style deck has a bunch of infect in it, has a bunch of stuff like that. And honestly, I don't know if it could get more poison out than your Finn. We'd have to do like a 1v1 maybe and see who could poison the other faster to really test that out to see, where that stands. But I definitely put him in the 3 as well, and he's a solid S tier for sure.
Yeah. Uh, but with that being said, he could easily compete with higher.
Absolutely.
But
I could see him being a 4.
yeah, like
100%.
I've played with him in bracket 4 pods and I've still done fine. The one thing I will say about Finn is although it's almost an automatic, okay, you're target number 1.
Right.
I haven't had a single person yet when I show up to a table and I say, all right, I'm going to play Finn. I haven't had a single person be like, oh man, what the fuck? Why are you playing that card?
Yeah.
It's not as salty as some other cards, which makes it a little bit more fun to play. Although you are still target number 1 most of the time because of how quick it can be. But regardless, we are on to Jack's last card. What do we got for us?
Indeed. We have probably my all-time favorite the green decks to play that I've had for a very long time, been upgrading it throughout the years. It is Izuri Renegade Leader.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So Azuri is 1 and 2 green for a legendary 2/2 elf warrior who has pay a green, regenerate another elf you target elf. So not even just elf you control, you can just regenerate another target elf. And then he basically has overrun for elf creatures. For 2 and 3 green, elf creatures you control get +3/+3 and gain trample. So this is your typical elf ball crazy, you know, I want to play as many cheap elves as possible, ramp them all out until I can plop down a giant Craterhoof behemoth and turn the whole board sideways and end the game.
Yeah.
I love this deck. It's been with me for many years. I know when you and I first started playing, this was probably the first deck. Actually, this was the first deck I believe I played against you guys.
Yeah, it was 100% the first
So,
deck you played against us. And I remember
yep,
it vividly because back then, there was no really Rule Zero conversations or anything
nope,
like that.
it didn't
And
exist. It was, hey, I'm gonna play whatever I want and you're gonna like it.
yeah. And
Rule
all I
Zero didn't exist. We
remember,
weren't kind.
yeah, all I remember was I was playing, might have been, you know
You were
what?
playing dinos.
Yeah, it was my first iteration of my Zakama deck.
Yep.
And at that time, when we first started playing and you first started hanging out with us and all that,
Yep.
our commander games were more the battleship cruiser style games. So
Yep.
when you first started and you pulled out that deck, I know I was like, what the fuck? Like, why the
Yeah.
hell did that go so fast? You shouldn't have been able to win that quickly. And
What was
that's,
it, like turn 4, turn 5?
yeah.
Something like that.
And
Yeah.
that,
Elf Ball is. Yeah.
yeah, and that was really for me the awakening that I had when I really started to dive in to Magic
You're
and
welcome.
learning about everything because I was like, fuck, I can make all these decks so much better. Why the hell would I keep playing like this? Because once I started hanging out with you, that's when I started going and playing more LGSs and all that. Because previous to that, I was just hanging out with our buddy Drace and my buddy Dennis before he passed away, and we were just playing kitchen table Magic. And
Yep.
we're essentially just, okay, whatever you got. And I know at the time, Drace's had the best deck at the table, and it was his freaking colorless Eldrazi. And looking back at it now, like I look at my decks I have, and I'm like, shit, those decks we were playing all fucking sucked. Like they would be worse than precons now. Like I'd put them more in bracket 2 or bracket 1. But
Yeah.
aside from that tangent, go on,
Yeah.
talk about your
So
elf love.
the elf. Yeah, the elf ball deck is very straightforward. You play all the good elf stuff. Your Llanowar elf, your elf mystic, your Findhorn elves. And then you also run things like Arbor Elf to untap your lands. You have fun, unique things, with all the different lords like Leaf Crown Visionary, Elvish Archdruid. And the main goal of the whole deck is basically just to pump out as many elves as possible really quickly because they're all dirt cheap mana wise.
Yep.
I've got at least 15 1-drops in here, or at least like 10 or so 1-drops that can come down. Most of them are 2 to 3s. The highest CMC that we have, or converted mana value, in this deck is a 4. And then from there, it just jumps to Craterhoof Behemoth at an 8. So everything is 4 or less, essentially, because Hoofy isn't going to come down till much later.
Yeah, no.
Much later being turn 3 or turn 4, Typically with this deck, if you're not ending the game by like turn 3 or 4, something kind of went a little awry.
Yeah,
But the deck is very strong.
yeah. Elf Ball is extremely strong.
It can go very fast with very minimal resources. For at least my build, I only run 30 lands.
Yeah,
So the deck can run on very minimal resources. It's very potent. And I definitely would want to address the difference in commanders for Elf Ball. 'Cause if you go to EDH Rec and you look at this deck, and you just look at like the top listed commanders, you won't see Azuri
Nope.
up there. All right, you will see Marwyn as the top pick for the elf style of deck for mono green anyway.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Then Marwyn the
Lafro
Nurturer.
is definitely the highest, but Marwyn is
Yeah, if
best
you
for
want
mono
to go
green.
right. Well, that's what people say, right? So Marwyn is the 3-drop, so same mana value as Azuri, but she has whenever another elf comes into play or enters the battlefield under your control, you get a 1/1 counter on Marwyn, and she can tap to add an amount of mana equal to her power. So with Marwyn, the way the deck plays, I think, is a little bit different depending on which of these commanders you want to go with. If you go the Marwyn route, you want her in play as soon as possible, and you need to keep her in play, right? You're very reliant on, I need Marwyn, I need her to be as big as possible, so I need her in play, I need to play as many elves as I can, pump her up, give some way to give her haste, and tap her for all the mana, go infinite, and have a grand old time. Which is great. That's a very viable, strong way of doing that. You've got things like Thousand Year Elixir, Concordant Crossroads. Like there are ways to give these elf mana dorks the ability to tap right away and do their thing. I just personally don't want to be that reliant on my commander in a sense because like for a deck like this where you're gonna be targeted, like you're gonna be targeted. All right, you're gonna have an X on your head. They're gonna see, okay, crazy elf ball deck. We know it goes fast. We know it goes hard. It's a bracket 4 deck. You know, any way you slice it, you're gonna have a target on your back. And with that, it can be very difficult to keep a card like Marwyn on the field in a high tier setting like that. So I go the route of, okay, let me play Azuri instead, and now I have a mana sink for the infinite mana I can create later in the game. Right? I can play Azuri when I need to, dump all the mana into his overrun ability, and then win the game on the spot. That's my argument for that. That's why I find that to be the better one. Oh, you went silent there, bud. You're not. I can't hear you.
Oh, I forgot to unmute myself because my dog started barking.
There you go.
Yeah, Azuri is definitely a very powerful commander, especially with the built-in trample effect as well as
Yep.
the ability to regenerate any of your elves.
Yes, because like that's the biggest threat to a deck like this is killing your creatures. So, unfortunately, he can't save himself with that. So having something like Lightning Greaves in play to protect Azuri is good. Like you definitely want to have that protection. But the biggest weakness of elves is just creature removal. My buddies, they got all the different types of removal that they run, and they know, you gotta know to kill the mana dork.
Yep.
Don't let that Llanowar elf sit. If you're up against an elf deck and you have a way to kill the Llanowar elf, do it. You will set the elf deck so far back, it's not even funny.
Yeah. Any mana
Like,
dorks, that is, not just Llanowar elves.
But the Elvish Mystic, the Arbor Elf, the Fintorn Elf, whatever dude you see, if it's just a 1-drop that says tap to add a green, kill it.
Yep.
Because that thing will go far.
Yeah. The amount of times that I've played in games and I've had a mana dork 1-drop, whether it's Llanowar elves, Elvish Mystic,
Birds of Paradise, whatever,
Paradise,
yeah.
anything, and I've had it sitting on the board the whole game from turn 1 and no one's done anything. It's amazing to me. Like, as
those need to be killed.
Yeah, those are figure out a way to get them off the board, as well as any mana rocks. But so with that, what would you put? What bracket? 3?
This deck is
3, 4?
This deck is a 4.
Yeah.
100%. This deck is a 4. It has multiple tutors, which is part of the way that makes it very potent. Things like Court of Calling, Natural Order, Worldly Tutor. even just like Elvish Harbinger and ways like that. There's 8 non-land elf tutors in the deck. Things like Green Sun Zenith, stuff like that. Just ways to pop out the elves as quickly as possible. And there's plenty of combos in the deck that can pop off. I got, you know, Staff of Domination that can make infinite mana. Sword of the Pay Runes makes infinite mana. And that, I think, is the biggest reason why I argue for Azuri over Marwyn, is that, say with Marwyn as your commander, right? Okay, I got Marwyn, I got my infinite mana combo. What do you do with it? If you don't have something like Azuri or card draw effects or some other mana sink, what are you doing with all that infinite mana?
Yeah.
And I will die on the hill that I want my mana sink in the command zone for when I build my infinite mana. I want that win available to me at any point in the game. So I don't want to have to sit and wait and dig to hopefully find my Azuri or to find my mana sink, overrun whatever. I just want that available at all times. So
Yeah, I don't disagree there. So, with that,
that's my elf rant done.
yeah. So
It's good. It's S tier and good.
Yeah, elves are always good.
Yeah.
So, my last commander.
What do we got?
It honestly, this one took me the longest to figure out what I want to do with this one. For those that have been watching us since the beginning, you know my favorite character in all Magic is Nissa. My damn dog is named after her. I love this character. The artwork is always fantastic, and her cards aren't even always that good. But for whatever reason, I've always been drawn to Nissa.
Yeah.
And the card I chose kind of goes completely away from what she normally does.
Yeah, you surprised me a little bit with this pick.
Yeah. And I wanted to do something different. So the Nissa I chose was Nissa World Soul Speaker. So for 3 and a green, for a 3/3 elf druid, she reads Landfall. Whatever a land you control enters, you get 2 energy tokens.
Okay.
Or counters.
Counters, yeah. Energy counters, yep.
You may pay 8 energy rather than pay the mana cost for permanent spells you cast.
There it is.
Yep. So, I know I surprised you with this one, because there's probably better Nissa cards. And
there's a few good Nissa. Like I would have assumed like the Origins Nissa to make like a Nissa tribal elf style
so
deck.
The ones I was looking at other than World Soul was definitely Nissa Resurgent Animist, which I've talked about building that one for a while until this new Nissa came out.
Right, like I was expecting something along the lines of like my Liliana deck that we talked about prior. But this is good. Nissa World Soul is she's potent.
So I was originally thinking I had Vastwood Seer or Resurgent Animist, and I decided for World Soul Speaker. So, World Soul Speaker, you pretty much going to want to stock up on energy cards. Get you cards that gain energy. So, you're going to want cards like Architect of the Untamed, Decocation Module, Etherflux Conduit. There's a shit ton of cards, especially from the original Kaladesh.
Right.
So there's a ton of cards from the original Kaladesh. Architects of the Untamed is the big one because it just pumps up your energy anytime a land enters the battlefield.
Which is phenomenal on top of what this is already doing.
Yes, and I wouldn't even worry about Architect of the Untamed second ability of paying a bunch and creating a 6/6 beast artifact. That I could care less about that. But Again, you're gonna want cards like Azusa, Lost but Seeking, um, cards Cultivate, all those
Yep.
generic. Give me all my lands. Even 3 visits it would be a good card for this one. But in terms of the deck itself, there is certain combos that you could throw in there that are kind of fun. You could do something like Greenbelt Rampager with Primal Prayers. Cast Greenbelt Rampager. When he enters the battlefield, it triggers, returning it from the battlefield to your hand, causing you to gain more energy. And you can just keep doing that. It's going to be an infinite enter the battlefield and infinite leave the battlefield effects here. There's a bunch of shit you can do with that. In terms of power, this deck, realistically, I'd probably put World Soul Speaker right around bracket 2. I don't think
Yeah.
she's going to be that strong of a deck. It could be a cool way to cheat in some higher cost artifacts and higher
Like
cost.
Blightsteel Colossus.
Exactly. Cheated like stuff like Blightsteel Colossus, cheating stuff like Ancient Green Warden. All these higher cost creatures, just cheat them in. Even stuff like Apex Devastator.
Yep.
But
That's a good one.
yes. But at the end of the day, she's not going to be overrunning the board like Finn or
Right.
Azuri. She's pretty much going to be, okay, we got this.
Yeah. You're gonna take your time. You're gonna build up your energy. You're gonna do the slow roll, green kind of fun style. Cause like this looks like a very strange, well not strange, different take on like green artifacts
Yes, exactly.
style of deck, which is something that you don't see very often. It's like, oh, you know, talk about going against the grain here. Green artifact deck. That's
Yep.
so far out left field that
Yeah.
you know you just don't see it happen, which is fantastic.
Yeah,
So
I mean, like some of the big artifacts that you can throw in there are like Gonti's Ether Heart,
yep.
Fabrication
Aetherworks
Module,
Yep.
Stone Idol Generator.
A lot of good, strong potential stuff that you just wouldn't typically see in a green deck.
Yeah, you would normally see it in
So
either like a
this-
blue or an Izzet deck, but it has potential to be decent. I would definitely put it bracket like 2, maybe bracket 3. But I
I
think
could see
that's
3.
I think you're more likely gonna be building this in a bracket 2 because
Yeah.
the power level of what it can do, I don't think it's just there. Maybe someone that knows energy better than I do will be able to prove me wrong. And if you can prove me wrong, please let me know because I
Yeah.
want to know. And
Yeah.
I'd love to see how you built this, that it's that good that it can compete with some of these higher tier decks. But with that, we haven't
That'll
really
do it.
received much in terms of spoilers recently. They did spoil.
No. Next week.
Yeah, next week we're going to be getting some more spoilers. What we did get was they announced the secret lair for SpongeBob SquarePants.
Oh, for fuck's sake, man!
Dude, I'll be honest with you.
I don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah, I'll be honest
I
with
want
you.
nothing to do with this.
When they first announced this, I was actually kind of excited because my fiance loves SpongeBob. I love SpongeBob. But I was so freaking disappointed. Like, I was hoping
Yeah.
to get some unique cards out of this set. But instead, they made fucking SpongeBob Joda.
Yeah.
Like, how the
fuck?
fuck does that happen? I mean, I will say, having Gary be Toxtril is kind of funny.
I mean, what even is that though? Like, why is Gary Tuxville? Like, that just doesn't.
It doesn't make sense lore-wise
No.
for SpongeBob.
Well, because like you look at this, right, and it's like, okay, so here's a SpongeBob Secret Lair, a way to maybe get some new players into the game, which is what I was seeing a few other people talking about, where it's like, all right, we've got some cool SpongeBob art, which like, yeah, I like SpongeBob as a kid too. Who the hell didn't, right? If
Yeah.
you didn't like SpongeBob growing up, I don't know what kind of childhood you had. It's just a funny show. The the films they made for it were pretty cool. But like some of these are just like Gary as Toxrill doesn't make any real sense. Because if you're a new player and you like SpongeBob and you see, oh, the SpongeBob card game, right?
Yeah.
That's with Magic the Gathering. Why is Toxrill gonna be one of the first things we want people to play with? Are you kidding me? Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense. And then Joda with SpongeBob,
Like,
how powerful do we need to make these to be? Like, that's just
like in terms of
we're giving them too
mechanics
much power.
and lore,
That's the thing.
I can understand why they made SpongeBob Joda. Because he brings everybody together. I get that. The whole F is for fun, U is for you and me bullshit. I get it. But why the hell did they make him a human fucking wizard? He's a fucking sponge, for Christ's sakes. I mean...
Yeah, I don't know.
Like, Plankton being Skrelv Defector Might, that's just fucking
That
weak.
kind of makes sense.
I mean, you would think the arch enemy of the entire show would be a little bit more powerful than a 1-1 with just toxic 1.
I mean, he does have toxic though. He is toxic.
True.
He
But
is pretty toxic.
I mean, I will say Squidward as Grazilax, Iflid Scholar, is kind of funny.
That one, yeah, I could see that.
That makes sense because Iflids are kind of like squids.
Yeah.
But the one that pissed me off the most was Patrick.
Oh, see, this one was one that I felt kind of just made sense. Like, I thought was kind of funny. He's just a vanilla 6'5" with no. He's
No
got nothing
nose.
going on in his head. Yeah, so like that one was kind of funny, but like Patrick Star is not black red.
No.
As like if anybody knows the character and they know the correlations of those two colors, that's just not who he is. There were better options.
Just like Plankton is not mono white.
Well, now mono white doesn't always mean good though.
Yeah.
Mono white can also because Elish Norn is mono white, and
True.
she's the farthest thing from being a good person you could find. So like, there's that kind of weird dichotomy to it as well.
Yeah.
But like they got memes. They turned Counterspell into a meme.
Yeah. Like
And like Knight's Whisper and Inevitable Betrayal.
Like I can see why they were doing it because they took the huge internet memes and they turned them onto cards. I get that. Like I was really hoping that we would get some unique legendary creatures for each of the main characters. Like I would have loved to see a SpongeBob that showed off his karate prowess and all that fun shit.
Like Sponge Monk. Make him a Sponge Monk.
But realistically, depending on the cost when these things drop, at the very least, I think I might invest in the Lands Under the Sea package. Just get those land cards.
The fuller lands do look kind of cool.
And that's only because I'd want to put them up on my wall. I wouldn't want to put them in a deck. Cool. Because, like, pretty much all across the upper echelon of my office, I have all my favorite full art lands from across the sets. The only ones that I don't have that aren't the only ones that I have that aren't full art that are up there are the beta lands.
Right.
Which
the ones that form a painting, right? Like the ones that
no. It's it's not beta. It's one of the original ones from the 90s.
Okay.
White border with the brown on the outside. And then the text box was the color of whether it was white, green, blue, black, red. But I have those up there just to kind of, and those ones are front and center of the whole thing. And that's kind of more so you can see where it all started. But like I would probably maybe put those SpongeBob ones up there, depending on the cost. But I really don't want to spend more than like $20 on them for an artwork piece.
Yeah, no.
I wouldn't go spend $90 to $100. That's for damn sure. But regardless, before we start dragging on too much here, as always, I am Kava.
This has been Jack.
And we will talk to you guys all next time.
And don't forget to like and sub if you enjoy the stuff.
Exactly. See you guys around.